It's live now.
Hi everyone, I'm Anjchita B, Nair, co-founder and COO of Culture. Welcome to this talk organized by the Heritage Olympiad. The Heritage Olympiad is India's only Olympiad on arts, cultures and heritages. Today we are joined by Spoorthy Raman to discuss her first children's book, India's Adventure in Space. Spoorthy Raman is an award-winning science journalist and storyteller who writes about everything science, from neurons to neutrinos. Her words have appeared in many national and international publications, and she also writes a monthly column for Sunday Herald called Tailspin, writing about her journey with her pets and sprinkling it with the latest science. Hi, Spoorthy, we're so happy to have you here.
Hello, thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and it's great to be here.
Right, let's just dive in. Institutional heritage is often overlooked when talking about Indian heritage. You'll be happy to know that the Heritage Olympiad has questions on institutions and people associated with them. Your book delves into fun facts and trivia about ISRO's work and famous personalities and scientists associated with it. Can you tell us a bit about your motivation for choosing to write a children's book on this topic? Like, did you always want to explore this particular aspect of ISRO? Yeah, sorry, we lost you there for a bit, I think.
Okay, I don't know what happened, so sorry about that. The motivation for this book, obviously, Chiki, who is the founder of Juggernaut Publications, Chiki Sarkar, she came up with this idea. So I was working with her on another book, and she came up with this idea saying that, hey, what if we write a children's book about, space? Because space is one topic which I think most kids find very fascinating. They want to know what's happening and things like that. So she floated this idea, and I was like, hey, yeah, sure. I mean, and India has, like, ISRO has been like kind of a pioneer in a lot of space missions in the world. So yes, we do have NASA's and the ESA's of the world, but then ISRO has a special place because some of the achievements of ISRO have not been even parallel in all these countries. So coming from a resource, I mean, like, I don't want to call it resource starved, but in the sense that we don't match up in terms of resources with the NASA's of the world. So that in itself, and trying to work around with the limited resources that they have is a very incredible achievement on their own. So we wanted to kind of highlight what ISRO has done. So that's where we started to kind of pick, on this idea of writing this children's book. And we also wanted to make it very appealing for children, because in India, we don't have anything in the market which caters to kids of that age, which is also a children's book, which is a board book, which is not like a, bulky, hefty book. And it has to be like fun for even parents to read it out, or for kids to like explore by themselves. And also talk about what India has done, because our audience is sitting in India. So we don't want to just say, okay, this is done in space. That doesn't make much of a sense. And many books already do that in some sense. So that was like the starting thread. And then we want to kind of also make sure like this address some of the things that India has done, obviously, and also things that India would be doing in the next few years, like the Gaganyaan and other missions that, that we are so passionate about and we talk about so much in the press and all of the popular media. So that's basically the motivation, behind us putting it all together.
Nice. So what was your process of research for this book? Were there any challenges in making these difficult scientific concepts, accessible to children?
Yeah, so the research process for me was kind of different, because so in my writing, which I've been doing for the past 5 years and more, I have focused on how to make science accessible to people. And when I say people, I'm mostly looking at adults who have very basic knowledge of science, but at least they are quite proficient in reading the language and in some sense can do their own research. So I could leave something not fully explained but give a gist, and they can find things and figure out their ways. But with kids, that's not going to happen, because while kids are very digital literates in some sense, putting the burden on them to figure out and Google and have the parents tell them is not something that we wanted to do. So, and I don't have my own kids. So first I started with like a small survey to figure out, what do kids find interesting about space? Yes, space is a huge topic, but where do you want to put, the most focus on? So I just sent out a small survey to kids of like my friends and family who I know well, and about like 15 kids kind of, were gracious enough to put in their responses. So from there, I figured out that kids love talking about rockets, obviously, and then they love to know what astronauts are and like, what do they do? And, I want to be an astronaut kind of a, thing. And then I wanted to figure out like, what else do they want to know about rockets? So they wanted to know how rockets fly. And they wanted to know what rockets do, what they carry, and, everything about rockets. Right. And then they wanted to know what astronauts do and what they eat and all that. So that's what you see in the book instead. And then they wanted to know like different planets, and obviously talking about planets is very dry. So we wanted to now add a bit of a layer to that to say, okay, what India has done in different planets or the moon or whatever. So that's why you see the Chandrayaan missions and the Mars mission featured in the book. And obviously that's ISRO's feat in many sense. So that's how these things came into being. And my research process basically then started floating my, the outline of the book and what I wanted to kind of focus with Chiki. And we sat through numerous iterations to like filter what we wanted to write about and all that. And the fact that this was an illustrated book and we knew that from the start. So we also wanted to kind of add content that is illustratable. Right. So we wouldn't just throw in something that the illustrator will have to struggle with. So that's another consideration that went into the book. So yeah, pretty much these things basically counted.
No, I'm glad you brought up the illustrations. The illustrations are beautiful. So how did you sort of conceptualize this? As in, what was your brief to the illustrator, Nirupama Vishwanath?
Yeah, so like I said, I had to first figure out how the illustrations would even look. Of course, I'm not an illustrator and I don't probably know zilch about it, but I just wanted to kind of, make her life easier in that sense. I can't tell her to illustrate something that's very, very, nitty and gritty of something, right? Like what is in the fuel engine of a rocket. That's something too much of a detail and also too much of an illustration burden on her. So once my manuscript was almost like final and also the outline was like final, we knew what each page would have and what kind of text each page would have. We brought Nirupama on the board. Chiki kind of brought her on board. And then my task was to tell Nirupama what each of them meant, like, what are rockets, because she's coming from an illustration background, but not necessarily a science background. So there might be new things for her also. And then I had to give like a, stock of images that I pulled obviously from the internet, but also from different media clips, because we were talking about a few things that were in the media. And then I had to pull out things that is on Wikipedia, and sometimes kind of generalize what we see in NASA and other things, because ISRO does not have so much of resources on its website, for example. So all of that I had to like pull it out for her. And then she also did her own research, which was again fantastic and kind of validated what I had provided. And then she came up with she would come up with a rough sketch and plan and layout of the page, etc. And then we would have to again make sure that it is accurate, because this is a science book, this is a non-fictional book, and we also kind of wanted to make it as accurate as possible so that there is no misinformation that we are unintentionally or kind of circulating around it. So that was our another layer that we wanted to kind of make it bulletproof in that sense. So yeah, so these things went into the process of me telling Nirupama and kind of bugging her with small details, which I think was important, but maybe for her it was like, hey, this is a small detail, why are we talking about it?
Right. No, I'm glad you brought up misinformation. Like, you have spoken about infodemics and misinformation around us with myths and wrong facts doing rounds. How do you think people can go about finding out authentic information, like especially children?
Yeah, I mean, counterintuitively, the web is a bad place, because it's a web of information, but then there is all sorts of information. And for example, if you just put in anything that is quote unquote controversial today, and those are the things that we will usually do some more, digging up on, etc. You get facts or alternative facts from both sides.
Right.
And that is probably very confusing, and there is no easy way out to see things through it. And it's hard on people, and it's hard on anybody. I'm not even considering children, because they probably don't know the cruel ways of the world, right? So I think instead of figuring and finding out or filtering facts, I would suggest filter out your sources, because on the face of it, which are the sources that have credible information and which are the ones that tweak around with information. So if you are able to, figure out which are credible, then I think the step one is kind of done. At least now you have a smaller subset of information that you have to deal with. The other thing is, of course, to keep yourself more open, open your ears, eyes, and mind to different kinds of information that's out there. Maybe all that is not true, maybe all that is not false either, but then it will give you some direction in terms of, okay, what other thoughts exist around this, and then you can, see how good or bad that particular line of thought is, and do your own research. But for us to do our own research, when I say us, I mean the lay public, you also need to know, I'm not just talking about science, but anything else, you need to know, you need to know the history. For example, when you talk anything about culture, to claim something is our culture, you need to know the history, and you need to know where it's coming from, what were the historical context of that particular culture, and things like that. So I think informing ourselves about that is the first step. And again, don't just rely on flashy media coverage, flashy things that you see on TV. Go back to books. I think books are way credible in that sense, because it's on print, and it's very, very hard to lie on print. You can say anything and escape when you're on video or something, and it makes it very flimsy like that. But when it's on print, there is, I think, in my mind, a heavier credibility than what you see on video and memes and social media tweets and opinions and stuff.
Right. As a storyteller in the domain of science communication, or sci-commerce, if I'm getting my terminology right, you're trying to make science more accessible and engaging for people. We at Culture are trying to do the same thing in the domain of heritage. What do you think we can do differently in this age of internet and social media platforms to make these, topics and concepts interesting, especially for a younger audience?
Yeah, this might look like I am basically going off track of what I just said, but then the younger audience, and especially I think even the older audience, that is, they're not exception either. They have a very strong pull towards video, pull towards multimedia. Like, for example, when I am basically a journalist, which means to say I rely on text. Like, I write text, I breathe text in some sense. So, but text is, right now, many publications are not happy with just the text. They want more multimedia in it. So that multimedia could be just as simple as an audio version of your article, which can make it more immersive, or it could be a lot of photos that you collect during your reporting, or it could be a lot of videos that you embed when it's in a online internet report, right? So I just wrote, like, in April of this year, I wrote a story for Science Magazine, which was about grizzly bears running on treadmills. And the study was basically using grizzly bears running on treadmills to figure out, why they were around people's trails. And it's a kind of a common happening in North America. You run into grizzly bears quite often when you are on a backcountry trail or something. So the research, while it spoke about that, the multimedia that went with the story was about grizzly bears running on treadmill. And the editors, and even I think that was very catchy compared to just some graphs or just an image of grizzly bear taken out of somewhere on the internet or whatever. I think that kind of captivated the action of the story, and that made it more engaging in some sense. So I think the more we kind of adapt to the changing needs of people, if I may say so, because video is very, very captivating. It gives you the flesh and blood, which is so very out of with text, right? You can't like give the flesh and blood when you write something. I mean, there are ways to do it, but it's not very apparent. But if you just show somebody on video, you know that they are like feeling and breathing people. It makes it very close to your heart. And I think we as psychomers, or you as heritage enthusiasts, you probably have to show more people and show more humanization of this concept. So I think that's what will make people more attractive to these disciplines, if I may say.
And also I think the curation and making the content accessible in shorter formats and in little tidbits which people can consume in their like busy lives, I think that's the way to go, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think with Instagram and TikTok and all that, which just rely on this fact that they are just 2 minutes, you get your message out and you're done.
Yeah. I love when museums come out on TikTok or Instagram and put out reels about, for collection awareness, because that's the medium where people are. So why not get there? So
exactly. And that's also the medium people are increasingly using to spread misinformation. So we might as well spread actual information.
Yeah. At Culture, we're always talking about exploring the people, processes, technology, and material behind every topic related to heritage. Your book seems to have done exactly that with respect to ISRO, sort of like behind the scenes of ISRO. I especially love that you've given information about scientists of ISRO. How can we bring people like this who have been instrumental in nation building to the forefront? I mean, because what you only see the highlights or that Chandrayaan has taken off, but the people behind it, how do we sort of highlight that?
Yeah, in the realm of psychom, increasingly we are telling ourselves and telling the world that you need to humanize science. Right. There is no other way that it can get closer to people. I can't just say scientists say. I need to show who the scientist is. Yeah. And I need to like make science a more like, with all the flaws that is there, because we are humans at the end of it, and science is a human endeavor. There might be biases, there might be flaws, there are malpractices and everything around, right? But in spite of all that, you can't just say, okay, somebody sitting in an ivory tower said this. That is not what we want. And the more we do that, the more we are going to be alienating science from people and people's mind. Right. So I think one of the ways to do it is obviously to show the people behind the work, behind science, behind culture, behind institutes, anything. It is all human endeavors at the end of the day. So we need to show more people out there. And also we need to be conscious of who we are showing, right? Because sometimes the limelight is always on people who are loud or who are at very powerful positions for whatever reasons, right? So when you talk about ISRO, most often people have this image of the chairman, because the chairman is always in the press meets and always answering media, is always on the front page of the newspapers, etc. But it's not that the chairman alone does a lot of things, right? Yeah. Science as such, and most of the things that as humans, we are social beings, so everything is a team effort. So I think when we journalists cover stories or when the press covers things, one of the important questions we need to ask ourselves is who else is behind this, and bring those hidden voices out. So Ritu Karidal, who we have featured in the book, is not someone who is almost always seen on media. But thankfully, some people, I don't take the claim here at all, but there have been some conscious effort where people have tried to bring her voice and put her there as a TEDx speaker, or as a feature in a magazine and things like that, saying what her contributions were for the Mars mission and for the Chandrayaan 2 mission and things like that. So I would appreciate such efforts. And I think also what we need to do, since you brought up the question of institutes, right? Like ISRO, there are others. And Tumba Research Station in Kerala is the seed of India's space program. I think as institutes, they also need to be very, very good at archiving, because that is our accurate source of history. If we don't have solid archives, then history can be manipulated the way anybody wants it to be. Right. And it could be, of course, there should be different versions of history, because you can view history in different lenses. But when you have something archived, that's the absolute fact. You can interpret the fact in different ways, but the facts by themselves don't change. Right. So I think probably invest a little more in archiving things that is happening there. So that would be a good source of information for anybody looking at it, say 50 years down the line or 100 years down the line. And that would be a fascinating story in itself that everybody needs to know. And that will also give a sense of who the people are and what people have done to kind of, get this all to the front.
Yeah, I'm at least glad some institutions have sort of started coming on social media and talking about, what they are up to and who are the people involved, because it sort of also, it attracts younger people to see that these are options for them, not just the same thing that people have been telling them to do, but there are these institutions doing amazing work, which you can be a part of. So it's very nice.
And I'm glad you said that, because that's one of the reasons why we have one spread about different things that space people do. Like we have this one spread in the book about what an astronomer does versus what a space engineer does versus what an astronaut does. So for kids, maybe like I grew up thinking that everybody who's working on space is an astronaut. That's not true, right? There are different kinds of people who have to come together to make something happen. And we wanted to kind of, at least in my head, I wanted to kind of like put that across in the book so that kids know that they could be an astronaut and do great things. They could also be an astronomer and do great things that is related to space and things like that.
Yeah. We have a lot of astronomical heritage questions in the Olympiad also. So I think we're also trying our bit to sort of, popularize astronomy.
I mean, yes, we have to have more voices doing this. And I think even science communicators have to talk about heritage because, like you said, ISRO's heritage is a lesson for a lot of institutional building. And it's also a lesson for how diversity or non-existence of diversity can kind of add to the mix and all that. So I think increasingly these boundaries are fading, and we have to start looking at each other's work and each other's way of doing things to make it more impactful for our own fields.
Yeah. Speaking of boundaries blurring, people often view science and heritage as subjects on opposite poles. We came across this project, Inventory and Site Management Plans for Heritage Sites. They've developed an inventory of 3,658 archaeological sites in the country with locations and photos. Are you aware of any other interesting projects where the world of science and heritage sort of come together?
I'm aware of this one project that I think India Literacy Program, which is an NGO which is active at least in Karnataka and parts of Karnataka, and I think even in Tamil Nadu right now and some parts of northern Karnataka, where the NGO is all about helping kids in government schools, in public schools, kind of have the best in class teaching aids. So that means having computer-aided teaching. So that could be showing stuffs rather than telling, images and other multimedia like we spoke about to make it more interesting for the kids. So they have done something in collaboration with Google Earth where their history lessons. So when they're talking about the Vijayanagar Empire, they have Google Earth photos and Google Street View and all those kind of technologies come live, so that when the teacher begins to talk about Hampi in the class, there is a virtual tour of Hampi for the kids. Because you have all those, relics right there, all the ruins that are around. And if you're like, I remember my history lessons in school where we spoke about Hampi and we had to just imagine how big or how the stone chariot looked like. And the only way we could imagine is with a photo. But now kids can actually virtually be there. And with increased technologies of virtual reality, augmentation, etc., I think more and more such teaching and educational resources are going to be around, where you can place yourself in the middle of something and see action happening around you. So that's something that I am aware of. And with the list of archaeological sites you just mentioned, I do think that's very valuable because, like I said, information around our own country's heritage is in bits and pockets. So even in Karnataka, where I come from, a lot of cultural heritage of the language, for example, is very reserved in pockets around, Shirsi, Shivamogga, and that place, like the first inscription of the language and things like that. and we hardly know so much about it.
Yeah.
So I think such a database is the first step, but we have miles to go from there.
Yeah.
And use science to help us understand, to help us date something, and to help us understand, how this is from 900 AD versus 200 BC and things like that.
Yeah. So I'm really happy that there is the whole movement of STEM becoming STEAM, where art is also integrated with science, technology, engineering, and maths. So using art to sort of help students understand STEM concepts and using STEM to create art. I mean, that's the kind of integration we sort of need. And I hope in India more and more things come up, projects come up like this. Speaking of regional languages, do you one of the ways we can make books and concepts accessible to more children is through regional language content. So, is there any plan of your book coming out in any other language?
I am a strong proponent of having anything that we write about also accessible in regional languages, especially in India, because only about 10% of our kids speak the way we do right now with the English
Right.
language.
Right.
So as of now, I don't know what the publisher's plans are, unfortunately, but I would love to see the book come up in as many languages as possible. And I think that is the whole point, right? What is the point of making it such privilege that it's only a small section of the people can understand this? And I hope the book does come, but I also hope that things like ISRO's website, that itself is only in English and some bits in Hindi.
Okay.
We don't even have that in other languages, and that is where I think a big change is yet to happen.
Right. Are there any other similar projects in the pipeline?
I have another book that I said I was working on, which I'm still working on, but it's towards the closure side of things, so I'm happy about that. That's not necessarily a children's project, but it's again a popular science book talking about India's achievements. So I wouldn't give a lot about it, but yeah. So that's coming. And with children's book, I loved working with this book, but I don't have anything in the pipeline. But I'm still figuring out what to write and what would be more, suited for the audience that I work with, etc. So yeah, nothing in the pipeline as such with children's book, but I love to see, what comes in the next few years.
Right. Should we take some questions from the audience? Dr. Suvi Kanchan says, usually things like food, festival, dances, etc. are considered part of heritage per se. But do you think we can consider science to be a part of our heritage?
I think if you look at India's heritage, a lot of it is grounded in some breakthrough achievements in science. Like, for example, Aryabhata's contributions to mathematics, and the way we have had planetary motions kind of detailed in the history of our science per se, right? History of science in itself is a big volume when it comes out of India. So I think a lot of that is already in science, but what has also happened is there is a lot of distortion again, something that we cannot probably explain it in a better way. We attribute it to either magic or science. So that's not probably doing us a lot of good, because that also means that we are damaging the credibility that we once had. Similarly, like for example, yes, I'm just taking this quote unquote controversial subject of Ayurveda, right? Of course, it's a branch of science in the sense that it is a branch of medicine, that there could be a lot of things that probably the allopathic or the Western medicine as we know may not really know of. And now they're taking notice of this. For example, curcumin, which is found in turmeric, is a known anti-cancer agent, and it's known for its anti-inflammatory properties. And we have been using turmeric for all our dishes from ages, right?
Yeah.
But what we need is now a way to show that these are not mere beliefs, but there is science rooted in it. And that means to say we need to approach this in a different way. We can't just say this, okay, I'm doing this because this has to be scientific because my grandmom did it. That's not probably, going to hold much truth now. We have to probably start looking at these practices and things from a different view to say, okay, if I don't consume turmeric for 10 years, my whatever inflammatory response in my body is going to go high up, but if I do, this is going to come down. And that's why probably, there is some truth in this being anti-inflammatory and things like that.
Right.
And also what is happening without such scientific basis, there is a lot of misuse of the name also. Like right now, you say every drug is sold in the name of Ayurveda. Ayurvedic texts actually had them or not, right?
Right.
And
Right.
most of the things, unfortunately, there was a recent research that came up, I think, about 2 weeks ago, which said that a lot of constituents of what is sold as Ayurveda right now come from synthetic chemicals.
Oh,
So when we're talking about synthetic chemicals, then that's not
that's not.
traditionally how Ayurveda was
Yeah.
supposed to be done, right?
Yeah.
And then we say Ayurveda doesn't have side effects. But if you're using chemicals which are not even the way that was supposed to be synthesized, then how do we claim that we don't have side effects?
Correct.
So I think as public, we need to kind of be aware of what is happening and how this is being used as a business prop. And we need to kind of inform ourselves how or why or why not something that we claim to be culturally ours is now going far away from what used to be good to us and what used to be ours and things like
Right. I mean, our heritage and science is completely interconnected. If you look at architecture, built spaces, Jantar Mantar is a scientific instrument in itself. It's not just a building. So it's definitely can't we can't divorce the two. Sarisi Ganguly asks, how did your interest get peaked towards science? Is there a childhood story behind it?
that. My dad is a scientist, so that's
Oh.
one.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of privilege also, because science, and unfortunately, is a pursuit of the privilege in some sense. Thankfully, that is blurring, I suppose, as we move on. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I was interested in becoming a doctor for a long time, since my childhood days. I always loved seeing myself as a doctor, and as things would have had it, I ended up becoming an engineer. And I thought, after working in a tech company for a few years, I was like, okay, this is probably what I love doing that. I have an MTech and I love technology. There's no, two words about it. But what happens is, when you are limited to technology, there's only so much you learn every day. And I unfortunately have a very curious mind that I want to know more things. So I thought, okay, it's too late to go back and do a PhD or whatever. Again, that's not something that I wanted to. So I thought the best alternative I had at that point in time was to write about science. And I didn't know science writing was even a career. I didn't know science journalism was a career. And I don't have a journalism background. So I just picked it up, and here we are after 5 years. I learn a lot about science, about different things in science. The fact that I write about is, a more of an afterthought or something like a side effect. But what I enjoy about my profession is that I get to know a lot of things. And
Right.
that's what I love about it.
Wonderful. Mudit asks, apart from your book, what other books would you suggest for children to learn more about science?
My book is probably not the top there, because it's just new and it just focuses on one thing. I unfortunately don't have a lot of information on today's children's book as such, because I'm in a different geography. And here, for example, in the libraries, you see a lot of books that are not just thematic, right? They can deal about like virtually anything. So I had a kid come to the library and ask, can I see a book about Halloween? So today is Halloween, and possibly he was interested about finding out, where this whole thing began or whatever. So he just wanted to see what is Halloween. Like, I want a book about Halloween. So that could mean that you have a storybook that talks about somebody in Halloween costume scaring somebody, doing the trick or treat business, or it could be something around the history of Halloween, right? So all of these are different threads, so to say. I think like that, Amar Chitrakatha, for example, was very instrumental when I was growing up. And of course, it doesn't really talk about scientists per se, but they have these profiles. They introduce comics and illustrations to me, and I'm sure that has been true with a lot of people in India as such. What I also would suggest is look for Amar Chitrakatha's new series that may have something to to do with scientists and profiling of scientists.
Yeah.
The other suggestion I have is Pratham Books Story Weaver. So Pratham Books is an NGO, a free resource, and I think it's a great resource that you can find online. I think it's prathambooks.org or something like that. And they have a lot of children's book that is available in the e-format that is free of cost. A lot of my science writing friends have, illustrated children's book out there. So check that out. That talks about a lot of science and talks a lot about scientists, like the people, right, who are behind it and their stories and things like that. So a lot of that is, everything on Pratham Books is free. And I do know that it is available in different languages as well. So that's a good source again. And if you have the money to spend, Osborne Books from the UK is another, nice interactive way of introducing different things to kids, not necessarily science. They have books on trains, they have books on airplanes and things like that. And if kids are really interested in that, and these are quite pricey books, so if you can afford, that is one option. But I do love what Pratham Books does. They have beautiful illustrations, all free of cost, and it's a big resource sitting right out there.
Right. Marcia asks, do you feel that not enough attention is given to scientific achievements of Indians, as most of the attention is given to the Western world?
Well, it depends, I would say. For example, one of the reasons why we started out with Research Matters, the organization I used to work with for 5 years until last year, is because a lot of press coverage of science in India at that point in time focused only as a syndication from the New York Times or Associated Press and things like that, which invariably meant that you have stories in the press about science where scientists not from India or maybe some from Indian origin did something great, which is fair. I mean, it's nice to know because science is a universal pursuit. But also that means to say our own taxpayers' money, which we are paying for all premier institutes in India and a lot of central and state-sponsored universities, we don't know what is happening there. Does that mean that these scientists are not doing anything, or is it just a communication problem, right? So that's what we tried to solve 5 years ago, where we said, okay, we will work with institutes and find out what they're doing and kind of bring those stories to the fore. And that's how Research Matters was born, in fact. So it is true in a sense that, a lot of media coverage was focused on an international arena, which is great, but it did miss, Indian contributions. But I am sure it's changed right now. At least there are winds of change. If you look at, for example, the wire science or the print science, those people, I mean, these are my colleagues, so I know the editors out there. And one of the things that they have in their mind is basically to write about Indian scientists and Indian work, either critique it or write about what was done, and basically, have that in their radar rather than just aiming to write about something that is thousands of miles away, which we don't pay for. We do pay for this, but we don't pay for what's happening in the US, for example. So I think that is changing, but we still have a lot to change, in my opinion.
Yeah, I hope lots and lots more books come out for children talking about history of science, history of institutions, people involved, and all the behind the scenes gossip.
Yeah. And I think, like I mentioned, the Pratham Books, thing that's out there, I do know a lot of scientists are profiled there as children's books. So I think efforts like this really help to bring these people. And I also want to mention that the kind of budgets that science desks have, especially in India, are really, really very small. Because right out, editors will tell you that science does not make money for them. Like they don't invite ads in the newspaper. I think now people have to ask for it and tell your editors that, hey, we are tired of all your ads and everything. We also need content like this. I think without people asking for it, editors are in their own ivory towers to say that this is not going to sell. Yeah. So I think it should be like, you ask for it and then you make it work that way.
Right. I would like to tell my audience that we are giving away 5 of Spoorthy's books to people who are registering for the Heritage Olympiad before 10th of November. So yes, thank you, Spoorthy, so much. I had so much fun talking to you today about science and heritage and institutions. I hope your book does really well.
Thank you so much. And yeah, thanks for having me. It was great way to start my day, of course, and a lot of great things that you were also doing. I hope and I wish you all the best in your adventures, if I may say so. And possibly we'll have a book about that as well.
Hopefully. Thank you so much. Okay, bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye.